My name is Houston. I'm 28 years old and work as a software engineer in Seattle. I've always been the responsible one in my family, the one everyone turns to when things go wrong. But when I woke up in that hospital bed after my accident, staring at the empty chair where family should have been, something inside me finally broke. Now, as I stare at my phone screen showing 53 missed calls and that desperate message from my mom, I'm faced with an impossible choice. Before I tell you how I ended up choosing between my family's desperate plea and my own self-respect, let me know where you're watching from in the comments, and hit that subscribe button if you've ever had to make a tough choice about toxic family members. Growing up as the older brother to Mason, who's 4 years younger than me, I always felt the weight of expectation on my shoulders. From an early age, it was clear that our parents, Richard and Barbara, had a favorite, and it wasn't me. Every little thing Mason accomplished was celebrated like he'd won the Nobel Prize, while my achievements barely registered on their radar. When Mason scored the winning goal in his middle school soccer game, my parents threw a massive party with all the extended family invited. 2 weeks earlier, I'd placed first in the regional science competition, and all I got was a distracted, "Good job," as my dad flipped through television channels. This wasn't a one-time occurrence either. It was a consistent pattern throughout our childhood. I still remember my high school graduation. I was valedictorian, and while my parents attended the ceremony, they left immediately afterward because Mason had a little league game that evening. There was no celebration dinner for me, no photos proudly displayed on the mantel. Just a rushed "Congratulations," and then they were gone, leaving me to celebrate with friends instead of family. Despite this imbalance, I worked hard to maintain family harmony. I understood early on that my role was to be the responsible one. I excelled academically, secured scholarships to reduce the financial burden on my parents, and built a stable career in software engineering. Meanwhile, Mason dropped out of college after just 3 semesters, claiming it wasn't his thing. My parents comforted him, told him he'd find his path, and continued to support him financially well into his 20s. Mason's work history was essentially a collection of false starts. He'd get a job, last a few months, then quit because his boss didn't understand his vision, or his coworkers were too conventional. Each time, my parents would nod sympathetically and open their wallets. When he decided to become a photographer, they bought him a $3,000 camera. 6 weeks later, it was collecting dust in his closet. When he wanted to start a food truck business, they helped with the down payment. 3 months later, the truck was sold at a loss. Through all this, I tried to be the supportive brother. I'd offer advice when asked, help Mason update his resume, even connect him with industry contacts. But my suggestions were usually met with eye rolls or accusations that I was showing off or being condescending. My parents often told me to stop pressuring your brother, or not everyone can be like you, Houston. The most recent family gathering, just 2 weeks before my accident, perfectly illustrated our dynamic. We were having Sunday dinner at my parents' house when Mason announced his latest business venture had failed, a subscription box service for artisanal hot sauces that had lasted all of 4 months. Before he'd even finished explaining what went wrong, my parents were already offering solutions, including financial support to try something new. When I gently suggested that perhaps Mason should consider stable employment for a while before starting another business, the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. "Not everyone is suited for the corporate rat race, Houston," my mother said sharply. "Some people have creative spirits. Mason just needs to find the right opportunity," my father added. "We believe in supporting his dreams." The unspoken contrast hung in the air. They had never supported my dreams because they had never needed to. I had supported myself through hard work and persistence. Somehow my self-sufficiency had become a reason to take me for granted rather than a source of parental pride. This dynamic created a complex inner conflict for me. I loved my family deeply despite everything. I wanted my brother to succeed and be happy. I wanted my parents' approval, even as I recognized I might never get it in the same way Mason did, effortlessly. But increasingly, I couldn't ignore the feeling that I was valued primarily for what I could provide: stability, reliability, and occasional financial bailouts, rather than for who I was. My life outside the family was fulfilling in ways my family relationships weren't. I had built a successful career at a growing tech company, earned respect from colleagues, and recently been promoted to senior engineer. My apartment in Seattle's Capitol Hill neighborhood wasn't lavish, but it was comfortable with large windows overlooking the city and a small balcony where I grew herbs and tomatoes in the summer. I had a tight circle of friends, Marcus from work, Alex from my college days, and Stephanie from my weekend hiking group, people who seemed to value me for exactly who I was. What I didn't have was a serious relationship. My last girlfriend, Rebecca, had ended things after 8 months, gently suggesting that I had walls up and trust issues. I denied it at the time, but in my more honest moments I recognized she was probably right. Years of being the reliable one who got taken for granted had made me wary of getting too close to people. It was easier to be the supportive friend, the dependable colleague, the generous brother, roles that kept me at a safe emotional distance, while still fulfilling my ingrained need to be useful. As I drove home from that family dinner, I found myself wondering if things would ever change. Would there ever come a point when my parents saw me as more than just the responsible son? Would Mason ever grow up and take accountability for his choices? Would I ever stop hoping for recognition that seemed increasingly unlikely to come? Little did I know, a rainy night and a patch of slick asphalt would soon force all of us to confront these questions in ways none of us could have anticipated. The accident happened on a Tuesday night. I had stayed late at the office for a product launch meeting that ran longer than expected, and by the time I headed home, Seattle was doing what it does best: raining. Not the dramatic downpour that makes you run for cover, but that persistent, misty rain that glazes everything and turns asphalt into something treacherously similar to black ice. I remember checking my watch as I pulled out of the office parking garage. 10:42. The traffic had thinned out and I was looking forward to getting home, maybe having a beer and unwinding before bed. The radio was playing an old Pearl Jam song, and I was absently drumming my fingers on the steering wheel, mentally reviewing action items from the meeting. I was taking the route I always took down East Lake Avenue toward Capitol Hill. The road curves gently as it approaches the I-5 overpass, nothing dramatic, a turn I'd navigated hundreds of times before. I wasn't speeding. If anything, I was driving more cautiously than usual because of the rain. Later, the police report would confirm this, noting that road conditions, not driver error, were the primary factor. One moment, everything was normal, and the next, chaos. My car hit a slick patch where oil and rainwater had mixed. I felt the initial slide, the sickening sensation of the wheels losing traction. I did what you're supposed to do. Turned into the skid, didn't brake suddenly, but it didn't matter. The car spun once, twice, and then I saw headlights coming toward me, blindingly bright. There was the horrible sound of metal crushing against metal, the violent jolt as airbags deployed, the sharp smell of burnt chemicals, and the taste of blood in my mouth. Time seemed to stretch and compress all at once. I remember thinking with strange clarity, "This is really bad." And then everything went sideways as my car was pushed off the road and down the small embankment that borders that section of Eastlake. When the movement stopped, the first sensation was pain. Sharp, insistent pain in my left side, a throbbing in my head, and a dull, worrying ache in my right leg. The second was the sound of rain on metal, somehow louder than before. The airbag dust made the air thick and hard to breathe. My glasses were gone, knocked off by the airbag deployment, making everything a blur of dark shapes and scattered lights. I don't know how long I sat there, dazed and disoriented, before I heard a voice. "Hey man, don't move. I'm calling an ambulance." A figure appeared at the shattered driver's side window, someone in a dark jacket, face concerned but reassuringly calm. Later I would learn this was Michael, a bar manager heading home after his shift who had witnessed the accident from 3 cars back. At that moment, though, he was just a voice telling me help was coming, a hand reaching through the window to squeeze my shoulder, the first link in a chain of kindness that would stand in stark contrast to my family's absence. The paramedics arrived within minutes. 2 efficiently compassionate professionals named Kate and Darren. They stabilized my neck with a collar, asked me questions to assess my mental state, carefully extracted me from the crushed vehicle. I remember Kate's gentle warning, "This is going to hurt, but we need to get you on the backboard," and the wave of pain that followed as they moved me. In the ambulance, as Darren started an IV and checked my vitals, I asked Kate for my phone. It had somehow survived in my jacket pocket, screen cracked but functional. While the ambulance navigated the wet streets toward Northwest Hospital, I made my first calls to my family. No answer from my parents' house. No answer from my dad's cell. No answer from my mom's cell. No answer from Mason. I left voicemails for each brief factual messages explaining there had been an accident, I was heading to Northwest Hospital, and would appreciate if someone could meet me there. I tried to keep my voice steady, to not sound as scared as I felt, but listening to the messages later, the strain is unmistakable. The emergency room was a blur of bright lights and urgent questions. A doctor named Raymond Wilson examined me, his hands, gentle but thorough, as he assessed the extent of my injuries. The diagnosis was delivered in his calm, measured voice: 3 broken ribs on my left side, a moderate concussion, a severely sprained knee with possible ligament damage, and various cuts and contusions. I would need to stay in the hospital for observation due to the concussion, with additional time for pain management, and to begin physical therapy for my knee. As they wheeled me to radiology for x-rays and a CT scan, I tried my family again. Still no answer from anyone. I told myself they might be sleeping, though it wasn't that late. Barely midnight. Maybe their phones were on silent. Maybe they'd check messages in the morning and come first thing. I pushed away the small voice that whispered they should have answered, that this was exactly the type of emergency when family is supposed to drop everything and show up. After the scans confirmed Dr. Wilson's initial assessment, I was admitted and moved to a room. The nurse who got me settled was named Jennifer, a woman in her 40s with a soft southern accent and efficient, gentle hands. She noticed me checking my phone again. "Still can't reach your family, honey?" she asked as she adjusted my IV. I shook my head, wincing at the pain the movement caused. "They'll probably come in the morning," I said, trying to convince myself as much as her. "It's late, and they might not have checked their messages yet." Jennifer's expression held a flicker of something, doubt perhaps, or sympathy, but she just nodded and patted my arm. "Well, you get some rest now. I'll be checking on you through the night, and Dr. Wilson left good pain medication orders. You're not alone." But I was alone in all the ways that mattered. That first night in the hospital was one of the longest of my life. The pain medication helped with the physical discomfort, but did nothing for the growing ache of worry and hurt. Why wasn't anyone answering? Had something happened to them too? Or were they simply not bothered enough to check their phones even late at night? I drifted in and out of a medication-induced sleep, each awakening bringing a fresh wave of hope that maybe now someone would be sitting in that visitor chair. But the chair remained empty, and my phone remained silent. Morning came with hospital routine, vital checks, medication, a bland breakfast I barely touched. Jennifer was replaced by a day nurse named Thomas, who helped me to the bathroom and checked my bandages. Around 9, I tried calling everyone again. Still no answer. I sent text messages this time, thinking maybe they'd be more likely to notice those. By noon, the hurt had crystallized into something harder and colder. This wasn't about them sleeping through the night or missing messages anymore. This was active, chosen absence. No one in my family had checked on me in 12 hours, despite multiple calls and texts explicitly stating I was in the hospital after a car accident. The truth was inescapable, sitting there in that sterile room with nothing but the intermittent beep of monitors for company. They just didn't care enough to show up. The second day in the hospital fell into a rhythm. Nurses checking vitals. Dr. Wilson stopping by to assess my condition. Physical therapists coming to discuss the rehabilitation program for my knee. The pain in my ribs made each breath a conscious effort, and the concussion left me with a persistent headache and sensitivity to light. But the doctors seemed satisfied with my progress. The CT scan shows no bleeding or swelling in the brain. Dr. Wilson explained, flipping through my chart. But with concussions, we need to be cautious. We'll keep you for another day or two for observation. I nodded, trying to focus on his words, through the fog of pain, medication, and emotional numbness that had settled over me. I still hadn't heard from my family, and I'd stopped trying to call them. The repeated silence had become too demoralizing. Around 2 in the afternoon, the door to my room opened, and I looked up expecting another nurse. Instead, I saw Marcus, my closest friend from work, carrying my laptop bag and a small duffel. "Jesus, Houston," he said, taking in my bruised face and the various tubes and monitors. "You look like hell, man." Despite everything, I smiled. Thanks. Just what every hospital patient wants to hear. Marcus pulled the visitor chair close to the bed. Rachel told us what happened. The whole team's worried about you. He set the duffel on the bed. I stopped by your apartment and picked up some clothes, toiletries, charger. Figured you might need them. The simple kindness nearly undid me. Thanks, I managed my voice rougher than I intended. Any chance you brought my glasses too? The spare pair should be in the bathroom drawer. Right here, Marcus said, pulling out my glasses case. And I brought your laptop so you don't go into coding withdrawal. As I put on my glasses, the world coming back into focus, Marcus looked around the empty room, his expression growing more concerned. Where's your family? I thought they'd be here. The question hit like a physical blow. I looked away, pretending to adjust the blanket. They haven't made it in yet. Marcus frowned. Haven't made it in yet? It's been almost 24 hours. I know, I said quietly. I can't seem to reach them. A flash of anger crossed Marcus's face, quickly controlled. He knew enough about my family situation to understand what was likely happening. Well, I'm here now, he said firmly. And the team wanted me to tell you to take all the time you need. Rachel's reassigned your projects temporarily. While Marcus was there, I decided to check my email and social media, something to focus on besides the conspicuous absence of my family. Marcus set up my laptop on the adjustable table, and I logged into my accounts. I hadn't intended to look at Instagram. It was just habit clicking through my regular sites. And there it was, posted 14 hours ago. A photo of my parents and Mason at Wild Waves theme park, all three smiling broadly, cotton candy in hand, clearly having a fantastic time. The timestamp showed it had been posted yesterday evening, hours after my first calls from the ambulance. But it was the caption that made my stomach drop and my ears ring. Finally, some peace without him. Best day ever, family time, no nagging. The post had dozens of likes, including from several extended family members and family friends. There were comments too. People I'd known for years responding with laughing emojis and adding their own jokes about the serious brother finally giving everyone a break. I stared at the screen, unable to process what I was seeing. They had received my messages. They knew I was in the hospital. And not only had they chosen not to come, they had gone to an amusement park to celebrate my absence. Marcus, seeing my expression, leaned over to look at the screen. His face darkened as he read the post. What the actual fuck, he said flatly. Houston, that's... I don't even have words for what that island. I closed the laptop, a strange calm settling over me. It's clarifying is what it island. Clarifying. It's cruel. It's disgusting. It's... Trime. Marcus was more upset than I was, or at least showing it more. You need to call them out. Right now. I shook my head, slightly mindful of the pain. Number, I'm not going to do anything. Houston, you can't just let this go. They're publicly mocking you while you're lying in a hospital bed. And what would confronting them accomplish? I asked quietly. Force them to feel momentarily guilty before they find a way to make me the villain again. Number, I think I'll just... observe. Take notes. Remember. Marcus looked like he wanted to argue, but instead took a deep breath. You want me to stay tonight? I can sleep in the chair. No, go home. I'm okay. Seeing his skeptical look, I added, Really? I've got a lot to think about and I could use some quiet time. After extracting a promise to call if I needed anything, Marcus reluctantly left. The moment the door closed behind him, the calm I'd been maintaining fractured. For the first time since I was a child, I cried. Not quiet tears, but racking sobs that sent fresh waves of pain through my broken ribs. I cried for the little boy who had never been enough for the young man who had tried so hard to earn love that should have been freely given for the adult who had finally seen the truth in all its undeniable clarity. That's how Nurse Jennifer found me, face buried in my hands, shoulders shaking. Without a word, she sat on the edge of the bed and placed a gentle hand on my arm, waiting until the storm passed. Do you want to talk about it? She asked when I finally looked up. I showed her the Instagram post. Her expression shifted from compassion to indignation as she read it. Oh, honey, she said softly. Family can be the ones who hurt us the deepest, can't they? I nodded beyond words. What are you going to do? Nothing, I said, my decision crystallizing as I spoke. I'm going to focus on healing. I'm going to protect my peace, and I'm not going to give them the satisfaction of knowing they've hurt me." Jennifer nodded slowly. "Sometimes dignity is the only thing we can control. But remember, chosen family can be more real than blood." I turned off my phone completely after that. Whatever happened next, I would face it on my terms, not theirs. If they couldn't be bothered to visit me in the hospital, I couldn't be bothered to be available when they eventually remembered my existence. The third day in the hospital brought a noticeable reduction in physical pain, but an intensification of emotional turbulence. The medical team had adjusted my pain medication, finding a balance that kept the worst discomfort at bay while leaving my mind clearer. Dr. Wilson seemed pleased with my neurological responses, suggesting the concussion was resolving well, and the orthopedic specialist who examined my knee confirmed that, while badly sprained, the ligaments were intact, a small mercy in the midst of everything else. Hospital life settled into a predictable rhythm: breakfast, at 7:30 medication, at 8 physical therapy, at 10 lunch, at noon, vital checks throughout the day, dinner at 6, final medication round at 9. There was comfort in this routine, a structure that provided scaffolding for my churning thoughts. During the long hours between these scheduled interventions, I found myself mentally revisiting key moments from my relationship with my family, seeing them with new clarity now that the Instagram post had removed any remaining .com illusions. I remembered my 16th birthday when my parents forgot entirely, because Mason had a school play the same day. When I mentioned it the following morning, my mother had looked briefly guilty before saying, "Well, you're not really into birthday celebrations anyway, right?" Creating a narrative where their neglect became my preference. I remembered my college graduation when they arrived late and left early because Mason was bored. The dinner celebration I had planned, my treat at a restaurant I could barely afford on my student budget, canceled because Mason wanted to get home to watch a basketball game. I remembered the time I got food poisoning and called my mother for advice, only to have her cut the call short because she was taking Mason shopping for a job interview. I'd spent that night alone on my bathroom floor, too sick to even reach the phone to call a friend. Mason didn't get the job. He overslept and missed the interview entirely. Each memory carried the same pattern: my needs minimized. Mason's prioritized my parents, enabling and encouraging the imbalance. And through it all, my persistent belief that if I just achieved more, helped more, complained less someday, I would be enough. Penny, for your thoughts. The voice belonged to Walter, my 86-year-old roommate who had been admitted for complications from diabetes. He had been quiet most of the time, but when he did speak, his observations were sharp and insightful. I hesitated then, found myself sharing the whole story. The accident, the ignored calls, the Instagram post, the years of feeling secondary in my own family. Walter listened without interruption, his weathered face thoughtful. When I finished, he nodded slowly. "Reminds me of my Robert," he said. "My son. We didn't speak for 12 years. This surprised me. Walter had mentioned his son several times, always with evident pride and affection. "What happened?" I asked. "I was like your parents," Walter said bluntly. "Had 2 sons. Robert was the responsible one like you. Michael was the charmer, always in trouble, always needing bailouts. I favored Michael. Not consciously, mind you, but looking back, it's clear as day. Robert tried so hard and I just took him for granted." Walter shifted in his bed, wincing slightly. The wake-up call came when Robert stopped trying, stopped calling, stopped visiting, just stepped away. And you know what? It took me 3 months to even notice he was gone. The parallel to my situation wasn't lost on me. "How did you reconcile?" "It wasn't easy," Walter admitted. "First I had to recognize what I'd done. Then I had to apologize. Really apologize, not that 'I'm sorry if you felt hurt' nonsense. And then came the hardest part: I had to change my behavior. Words without action would have just been more of the same." He looked at me directly. "Your family might never have that moment of clarity. Some people don't. And here's the thing, young man, you can't make them see it. The only person whose behavior you can control is your own." "So what should I do?" I asked, genuinely wanting his perspective. Self-respect isn't selfish, Walter said firmly. Sometimes it's the only thing that saves you. Set boundaries. Be clear about what you'll accept and what you won't. Be prepared for them to push back to call you difficult or selfish or ungrateful. And know that choosing yourself doesn't mean you don't love them. It means you finally love yourself enough too. His words resonated deeply, articulating the decision that had been forming in my mind since seeing that Instagram post. I would no longer contort myself trying to earn approval that should have been freely given. I would no longer accept being valued only for what I could provide rather than who I was. I would love my family, but from a distance that protected my newfound self-respect. The afternoon brought more physical therapy, focusing on gentle movements to maintain mobility in my injured knee without straining the healing tissues. The therapist, David, was patient and encouraging, explaining each exercise and its purpose. When I mentioned I might be going home the next day, he provided detailed instructions for continuing therapy at home. The key is consistency, he explained. Small, regular movements will help you heal faster than sporadic, intense sessions. It struck me that this advice applied equally well to emotional healing. Small, consistent acts of self-care and boundary maintenance would ultimately be more effective than dramatic confrontations or grand gestures. By evening, Dr. Wilson confirmed I could be discharged the following morning, provided I had someone to drive me home and stay with me for at least the first 24 hours. I assured him Marcus had already volunteered, which was true. He had texted the nursing station since my phone remained off. My final night in the hospital was spent in quiet contemplation. The decision not to reach out to my family felt simultaneously liberating and terrifying. Years of conditioning had taught me that my role was to maintain family harmony at any cost to myself. Stepping away from that role meant stepping into unknown territory. But as Walter had said, self-respect sometimes had to come first. As I drifted off to sleep, I found myself wondering how long it would take my family to notice my absence. Walter's words echoed in my mind. It took me 3 months to even notice he was gone. Would my family realize sooner? Or would they only reach out when they needed something from me again? The answer would come sooner than I expected, and in a form I could never have anticipated. The discharge process began early the next morning, a flurry of paperwork, prescriptions, and instructions. Dr. Wilson reviewed my medications, emphasizing the importance of taking the pain relievers as scheduled rather than waiting until the pain became severe. The goal is to stay ahead of the pain, he explained. It's much harder to control once it's intense. The physical therapist provided printed exercises with clear illustrations, and the discharge nurse went through the warning signs that would warrant a return to the hospital. By 10:30, I was sitting in a wheelchair at the entrance where Marcus was waiting with his car. "Chariot awaits, good sir," he said with a theatrical bow, trying to lighten the mood. I appreciated the effort, even if my smile felt stiff and unnatural. The drive to my apartment was jarring after days in the quiet hospital. The city seemed too loud, too bright, too fast. Each bump in the road sent a wave of pain through my ribs despite the medication. And by the time we arrived at my building, I was gritting my teeth and sweating slightly. "You okay?" Marcus asked as he helped me from the car. "Yeah," I managed. "Just forgot how much moving hurts." The elevator ride to my 4th-floor apartment felt interminable. When Marcus finally unlocked my door, and I stepped inside, the sight was both comforting and strange. Everything exactly as I'd left it 3 days ago, untouched by the seismic shift in my emotional landscape. Mail had piled up on the floor beneath the mail slot. A coffee mug still sat on the counter where I'd left it before work on the day of the accident. The plant on the windowsill drooped slightly, needing water. Marcus helped me settle on the couch, arranging pillows to support my injured knee and minimize pressure on my ribs. He then moved efficiently around the apartment, watering plants, collecting mail, organizing my medications on the kitchen counter, putting away the clothes and toiletries he'd brought to the hospital. "I stocked your fridge yesterday," he said, opening it to show me. "Nothing fancy, but enough that you won't have to cook for a few days. And I've set up a food delivery account. Just use the app when you need something." The contrast between his thoughtful care and my family's absence was so stark, it was almost physical. "Marcus, I don't know how to thank you." He waved it off. "Don't mention it. You'd do the same for me." He checked his watch. I've taken the day off to get you settled, but I should run out for your prescriptions. Will you be okay for 20 minutes? After assuring him I would be fine, I found myself alone in my apartment for the first time since the accident. The silence was profound after the constant background noise of the hospital. I leaned my head back against the couch and closed my eyes, allowing myself to fully feel the mix of relief at being home and apprehension about managing my recovery largely alone. When Marcus returned with my medications, he helped me take the first doses and then set alarms on my phone for the next rounds. You'll need to stay on schedule with these, he reminded me, echoing Dr. Wilson, especially for the first few days. By early afternoon, the reality of my new limitations became clear as I attempted my first solo trip to the bathroom. Every movement required planning and caused pain. The simple act of standing from the couch was a negotiation between various injured parts of my body. The short walk down the hallway left me breathless and shaking. The bathroom itself presented unexpected challenges: how to lower myself to the toilet without putting weight on my bad knee, how to wash hands while balancing on one leg. But it was the shower that became symbolic of my new reality. Marcus had helped set up a shower chair and installed a handheld showerhead attachment before he left for the evening, promising to return in the morning. Standing under the warm water, awkwardly maneuvering to keep my bandages dry, I was struck by the profound vulnerability of my situation and the unexpected strength I was finding within it. This shower, this small act of self-care accomplished through pain and difficulty, represented a new kind of independence. Not the capability-based independence I'd always prided myself on, but something deeper, an emotional independence born from the recognition that I could face hardship without my family and still survive, still find moments of peace and even small victories. Over the next few days, a rotation of friends stepped in to help. Alex brought homemade meals portioned into containers that could be easily reheated. Stephanie ran errands, picking up groceries and a knee brace more comfortable than the hospital-issued one. Colleagues sent a massive fruit basket with a card signed by everyone on my team. My neighbor Lisa walked my trash to the chute each evening and brought in my mail. The contrast with my family's absence couldn't have been more pronounced. These people, friends, colleagues, even neighbors, showed up without being asked, offering specific help, rather than vague platitudes, checking in without being intrusive. They demonstrated what genuine care looked like, making the behavior I'd accepted from my family for years seem even more unacceptable by comparison. On the third day home, my boss Rachel called. "Just checking in," she said. "And before you ask, no, I don't need updates on the Mendoza project. It's covered." "Thanks," I said, genuinely relieved. "I've been trying to keep up with emails, but—" "Stop," Rachel interrupted firmly. "Houston, you were in a serious accident. Your job right now is to heal, not monitor your inbox. We'll manage. That's what teams are for." Her words struck me deeply. That's what teams are for. My family had never functioned as a team, at least not one that included me as an equal member. I had always been support staff, expected to help, but not expect help in return. It was Rachel who finally asked the question. Others had been too polite to voice directly. "Houston, where is your family in all this? Shouldn't they be helping you?" The question, asked with genuine concern rather than judgment, broke through the careful neutrality I'd been maintaining on the subject. I found myself telling her about the ignored calls, the Instagram post, the years of imbalance. "I've turned off my phone," I concluded. I need space to process all this without their voices in my head telling me I'm overreacting or being selfish." "That's not selfish, that's self-preservation," Rachel said firmly. "And for what it's worth, I think it's long overdue." By the end of the week, I had established a new routine. Medications, exercises, rest periods, short walks around the apartment to maintain mobility. I was moving a little better each day, though the pain in my ribs remained sharp with certain movements, and my knee still couldn't bear full weight. It was exactly 1 week after my discharge from the hospital that I finally decided to turn my phone back on. The decision wasn't made lightly. I had come to value the quiet bubble I'd created, free from my family's expectations and demands. But complete isolation wasn't sustainable long-term, and I needed to at least check messages from friends and my medical team. I wasn't prepared for what I found when the screen finally lit up. The morning routine had become almost mechanical by then. Pain medication with a small breakfast, gentle stretching exercises, a cautious walk around the apartment to loosen stiff muscles. I was moving more easily now, though the bruises on my face and torso had evolved into a spectacular array of yellows and purples, and my ribs protested sharply if I moved too quickly or breathed too deeply. Sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee, I held my phone in my hand, thumb hovering over the power button. A week of digital silence had been unexpectedly peaceful. No emails demanding responses, no social media updates triggering comparisons, no family messages requiring emotional labor to address. But it was time to reconnect at least partially. The phone took several moments to power up, and then the notifications began. A steady stream at first, then a torrent. Emails, text messages, voicemails, missed calls. Most were from friends and colleagues checking in medical follow-up appointments, routine communications I'd have to sort through later. But what made my heart rate spike, and my hands begin to shake, was the count of missed calls from my family, 53 in total, 22 from my mom, 18 from my dad, 13 from various extended family members, aunts, uncles, cousins, all within the last 24 hours. The voicemails started politely enough. "Houston, it's Mom. Give me a call when you can." "Houston, Dad here. Need to talk to you about something. Call back." But they quickly escalated in urgency. "Houston, where are you? This is important. Call immediately." "Houston, for God's sake, pick up your phone. This is an emergency." The text messages followed the same pattern, beginning with casual check-ins before devolving into all-caps demands and accusations of selfishness for not responding. The final message sent just 3 hours ago was from my mother. "Your brother's in trouble. We need you now." I sat there staring at the screen, a cold weight settling in my stomach. This was exactly what Walter had warned me about. They hadn't noticed my absence until they needed something from me. Not once in any of the messages was there mention of my accident, my hospital stay, or concern for my well-being. Just increasing demands for my assistance with whatever crisis Mason had created now. My mind immediately went to previous Mason emergencies I'd been called in to help resolve. The time he'd maxed out 3 credit cards and needed me to co-sign a debt consolidation loan. The time he'd been fired for chronic lateness and needed me to connect him with someone in my professional network. The time he'd crashed my parents' car after drinking and needed me to help convince the insurance company it had been stolen. Each time I had stepped in, each time I had fixed things, each time my enabling had allowed Mason to avoid consequences and my parents to avoid acknowledging their role in creating a son who couldn't function as an independent adult. Based on the frantic tone of the messages and a few specific references in the texts, I pieced together what had happened. Mason had been arrested for driving under the influence and property damage. He had apparently crashed into a storefront after a night of drinking. No one was hurt, thankfully, but he was facing serious charges. My parents wanted me to pay his bail and the retainer for a good attorney. They also hoped I could talk to some people at the courthouse, apparently believing my professional connections extended to the criminal justice system. As I sat at my kitchen table, still bandaged and bruised, the absurdity of the situation hit me with full force. For a week, while I was struggling with basic self-care after a serious accident, they hadn't checked on me once. Now, because Mason needed money and connections, they were blowing up my phone as if their lives depended on my immediate response. The familiar pressure began building in my chest, the weight of responsibility, the ingrained need to rescue, to fix, to smooth things over. My breathing quickened, sending sharp pains through my injured ribs. My hands grew clammy, and the room seemed to tilt slightly. In that moment, I recognized the physical symptoms of anxiety that had become so normalized, I rarely noticed them anymore. This was how my body had always responded to family crises, with fight-or-flight reactions that I'd learned to override in the name of being dependable. My phone rang, startling me. Not family this time, but Marcus checking in. "Hey, how's the invalid doing today?" he asked cheerfully. I turned my phone back on. I said, my voice sounding distant, even to my own ears. There was a pause, and 53 missed calls from my family in the last 24 hours. Mason got arrested for DUI and property damage. They want me to bail him out and pay for his lawyer." Marcus was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was careful but firm. "And what are you going to do?" "I don't know," I admitted. "Part of me wants to rush in and fix it like I always do. Make it all go away so everyone can go back to pretending everything's fine. And the other part remembers that Instagram post," I said quietly. "Remembers lying in that hospital bed for 3 days while they went to an amusement park. Remembers that they only called when they needed something from me." Marcus's response was immediate and unequivocal. "They showed you who they are, Houston. Believe them." The simplicity of the statement cut through the fog of obligation and habit. My family had shown me repeatedly and consistently exactly who they were and what they valued. The Instagram post wasn't an anomaly. It was just the most blatant expression of a dynamic that had existed for years. "You're right," I said, a new resolve strengthening my voice. "I need to stop pretending they'll ever be the family I want them to be." "So, what now?" Marcus asked. "Now," I said, "I need to figure out how to respond in a way that maintains my self-respect but doesn't slam the door completely. Because despite everything, they're still my family and I do love them." After we hung up, I sat with my thoughts for a long time, considering my options. Complete silence would be easiest emotionally, but would likely lead to escalating attempts to contact me, possibly including someone showing up at my apartment, something I wasn't physically or emotionally equipped to handle in my current state. A scathing response calling out their hypocrisy would be momentarily satisfying but would close the door on any future relationship. What I needed was a response that established clear boundaries while leaving room for potential change, not because I expected it, but because I wanted to remain true to my own values, regardless of their behavior. The decision settled in me with surprising clarity. For the first time in my life, I would respond to a family crisis by putting myself first, not out of spite or revenge, but out of the self-respect that Walter had so wisely identified as essential to survival. After careful consideration, I composed a text message to my mother. "I'm aware of Mason's situation. I'm sorry he's in trouble, but I won't be providing bail money or attorney fees. I've just been released from the hospital after a serious car accident, the one I called about repeatedly last week while you were all at Wild Waves. I'm still recovering and not in a position to help financially or otherwise right now. I hope Mason gets the support he needs to make better choices going forward." I read it 3 times before hitting send, making sure it was clear but not cruel, firm but not vindictive. The response was immediate. My phone rang within seconds of the message being delivered. My father's name appeared on the screen. For a moment I considered not answering, but that would just delay the inevitable conversation, and I wanted to get it over with. I took a deep breath, wincing at the pain in my ribs, and accepted the call. "Houston, what the hell kind of message is that?" My father's voice was tight with anger. "Your brother is in serious trouble." "I know, Dad." I read the messages. "Then you know we need to get him out today. The bail is set at $15,000, and we need at least $5,000 for a retainer on a good lawyer." "I'm not paying that," I said, my voice calmer than I expected. "Mason created this situation with his choices. He needs to face the consequences." There was a moment of stunned silence before my father exploded. "How can you be so selfish? He's your brother. Family helps family. Where was that family help when I was in the hospital for 3 days after my car accident?" I asked quietly. Another pause. "What are you talking about?" "Last week, Tuesday night, I was in a serious accident. Broken ribs, concussion, knee injury. I called all of you from the ambulance. I left messages. I texted. No one responded. No one visited. No one even called to check if I was alive. We didn't get any messages," my father said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Dad, I saw the Instagram post. Finally, some peace without him. Best day ever. Posted while I was lying in a hospital bed waiting for any of you to show up." He switched tactics. "That was Mason being thoughtless. You know how he island. Your mother and I had nothing to do with that caption." "But you were there, Dad, at an amusement park, the day after I told you I was in the hospital." "Houston, you're blowing this out of proportion. We didn't realize your accident was that serious. Because you never bothered to find out I interrupted a rare occurrence in our family dynamic. You didn't call, you didn't text, you didn't visit, you didn't care until you needed something from me. His voice hardened. So this is revenge. We didn't visit you, so you won't help Mason. No, Dad. This is a boundary. For years I've dropped everything whenever Mason created a crisis. I've paid his bills, fixed his mistakes, used my connections to get him jobs he didn't keep, all while you and Mom enabled his behavior and took my help for granted. I'm done with that pattern. So what are we supposed to do? He demanded. Just leave him in jail. That might be exactly what he needs, I said. Maybe facing real consequences will do what our collective enabling hasn't, help him grow up and take responsibility for his actions. I can't believe what I'm hearing, my father said, his voice rising. This isn't you, Houston. You've always been the dependable one, the one we could count on. That's the problem, Dad. I've been the dependable one because Mason has been allowed to be the irresponsible one. It's not working for any of us anymore. If you don't help your brother now, when he really needs you, my father said, his voice low and threatening, don't expect us to be there for you in the future. The irony of the statement was so profound I almost laughed. Dad, you haven't been there for me in the present, or the past. Why would I expect a different future? Is that what you think? That we haven't been there for you, after all we've done? What exactly have you done, Dad? When have you ever put my needs first? When have you ever celebrated my achievements the way you celebrate Mason's smallest efforts? When have you ever shown up for me the way I've always shown up for? All of you. His silence was answer enough. I've been estranged while sitting right beside you my whole life, I said quietly. At least now we're being honest about it. The call ended shortly after, with my father still angry, but perhaps I hoped with the first seeds of understanding planted. I had no illusions that one conversation would change decades of family dynamics, but it was a start. The first time I had clearly articulated my experience and set explicit boundaries around what I would and would not do. The following days brought a flurry of messages from extended family, some supporting my decision to step back, others criticizing what they saw as abandonment of my brother in his time of need. I responded to each with the same calm clarity. I loved my family, but I was no longer willing to enable harmful patterns or be valued only for what I could provide in a crisis. Mason himself eventually reached out about a week after his arrest. He had been released on a bond arranged by my parents, who had apparently scraped together the money themselves. His message was a study in half-hearted accountability. Hey bro, heard you were in an accident. That sucks. Sorry I didn't check in, things have been crazy with this legal stuff. I know you're mad about the Instagram post. It was just a joke, didn't mean anything by it. Anyway, hope you're feeling better. No acknowledgement of the hurt caused no real apology, no recognition of the pattern of behavior, just the same old Mason skating on the surface of responsibility without ever diving into its depths. My response was measured. I accept your apology for the post, Mason. I hope your legal situation resolves in a way that helps you make better choices going forward. I'm recovering slowly but surely. So we're good, he texted back immediately. We're in a different place, I replied. I love you, but our relationship needs to change. I won't be able to help financially or use connections to fix situations anymore. I'll support your growth and genuine efforts to change in other ways. His response was telling, a thumbs-up emoji, followed by radio silence. Without the prospect of practical assistance, Mason had little interest in maintaining communication. It hurt, but it also confirmed the wisdom of my new boundaries. 3 months passed. My physical recovery progressed well. Ribs healed, concussion resolved completely, knee improving with consistent physical therapy. The emotional healing was more complex but equally progressive. Weekly sessions with a therapist helped me untangle the knot of family dynamics and establish healthier patterns of thinking about my worth and relationships. A support group for adult children of emotionally immature parents provided perspective and community. My contact with my family became limited but intentional. Short-scheduled phone calls with my parents, occasional text exchanges with Mason, no rushing to respond to non-emergencies, no dropping everything when they called. It was uncomfortable at first, for all of us, but gradually, a new pattern emerged. Without me as the automatic fixer, my parents had to develop new strategies for handling Mason's issues. Mason, faced with fewer bailouts, began showing small signs of greater responsibility, keeping a job for longer than a few months, making payments on his legal fines without prompting. My parents, though still favoring him in subtle ways, became marginally more aware of the imbalance in how they treated us. When the invitation to Christmas dinner arrived, I spent days deliberating. Returning to the family home would be a test of my new boundaries. After discussing it with my therapist, I decided to attend, but with safeguards in place. I would drive separately so I could leave if needed, stay at a hotel rather than my parents' house, and bring Marcus as moral support and witness. The dinner itself was a study in family dynamics in transition. There was initial tension, awkward silences, a few passive-aggressive comments about my new attitude. But there were also moments of genuine connection, tentative acknowledgments of past hurts, small signs that my parents were at least trying to see me more clearly. Mason, surprisingly, was the most changed. Whether from the legal consequences he'd faced or simply from maturation, he seemed less entitled, more aware of others. He actually asked about my accident, listening to the answer with what appeared to be genuine concern. When he mentioned a new job prospect, he did so without the grandiose predictions of immediate success that had characterized his previous ventures. My parents watched our interaction with expressions I couldn't quite read. Perhaps surprise at seeing us relate as adults rather than as the roles we'd been assigned in childhood. Perhaps discomfort at the realization that the family dynamic was shifting in ways they couldn't control. As we were leaving, my mother pulled me aside. "I've been thinking about what you said," she began hesitantly, "about us not being there for you. I didn't want to see it, but I think you might have been right." It wasn't a full acknowledgement or apology, but it was a start, a crack in the wall of denial that had characterized our relationship for so long. I didn't push for more, recognizing that real change would come slowly, if at all. "Thank you for saying that," I said simply. "It means a lot to hear." The true revelation of that hospital room, that sometimes being alone is better than being with people who don't value you, remained the guiding principle of my new approach to family relationships. I would engage, but with clear boundaries. I would love, but not at the expense of my self-respect. I would be available, but not exploitable. As Marcus and I drove back to the hotel that night, he asked if I regretted taking such a firm stand 3 months earlier. "Not for a second," I replied without hesitation. "It was the hardest thing I've ever done, but also the most necessary." "They're trying," he observed, "in their awkward, imperfect way." "They are," I agreed, "and that's all I can ask for. Effort, not perfection. Just like I'm trying too. The difference is that now I'm not the only one expected to try." The journey from that hospital bed to this new equilibrium hadn't been easy or straightforward. There had been difficult conversations, painful realizations, moments of doubt and loneliness. But there had also been growth, authenticity, and a new kind of relationship with myself and my family. One based on reality rather than roles, on mutual respect, rather than one-sided obligation. As I look back now on those 53 missed calls and that desperate message from my mother, I realize that sometimes the most powerful response isn't answering the call, but asking why they never called when you needed them most. Sometimes healing family relationships requires breaking unhealthy patterns first, even when that breaking feels like betrayal to those who benefited from the status quo. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice between family obligation and self-respect? Let me know in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories about finding strength in difficult situations. And if you know someone who might be struggling with similar family dynamics, share this video with them. Sometimes knowing we're not alone in these challenges is the first step toward healing. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's often the most loving thing you can do for yourself, and ultimately for those around you.